I didn't even know exactly what this was, and now there are all these people here. It's amazing. Okay. Good morning.
No, I'm the interviewer, and you have notes, and I'm
well, because we talked for 5 minutes yesterday, yeah. and I took notes on what we said because I'm a crazy person.
Well, maybe as a place to start, you right now kind of do so many different things. You're working kind of both in like your radio show, working on podcasts, now doing more and more live events, and just the one thing that seemed to me sort of a connective thread between all of those. First of all, do you ever get tired of talking?
Yes. Yeah, I totally do. Yeah.
And so what do you do about that? Like when you're by yourself or at home, are you mostly quiet?
Yes. Yeah. And in fact, like I like being alone a lot. And I definitely have days where like I just can't. Like there have been days, like the last 4 days I've been on the road, where I'd get to the end of the day, I couldn't even call my wife to talk to her because it had been like go to a thing, meet 100 public radio listeners at a public radio reception, and talk to every one of them, and then give like a 2 hour and a half talk and Q&A, and then another thing after that. I just felt like at the end of the day I can't talk anymore. Yeah. But and also there are a lot of situations where to publicize things, I'm in the kind of situation where I have to keep telling the same stories over and over, which is a weird thing to do as a person. Which I think actors do it all the time, and people who publicize stuff do it all the time. But I still find it strange.
I know. What for you is kind of the connective thread between all the different things that you do? Is it journalism, storytelling? Like what sort of like for you binds all those different things?
Well, it was journalism, but then we started making movies and doing other stuff, and so now it's just kind of any sort of story. Honestly, it's not sophisticated. It really is just like, oh, that seems like that would be fun. Let's do that. It's really like it's not like there's a plan or anything more than looking for something that would be amusing and kind of hard. And so there've been like a bunch of things, including the new movie and the first movie I did with Mike Birbiglia, and then also we do these cinema events where we do our show on stage and beam it into movie theaters around the country, and we did a musical with Lin-Manuel Miranda and little operas at Brooklyn Academy of Music, just because it seemed like, oh, that would be cool. And what else? I'm touring in a dance show that's been here in Austin at the Paramount. And we're going to end our tour of the dance show at the Sydney Opera House, which is we're only doing it just because it's ridiculous. It just seems like a ridiculous goal, and it's just like, that's it, we're doing it, July.
But now, how did that happen? Did someone in Australia approach all of you, like a promoter?
No. No one in Australia is like, you know what, we need to get a radio host and 2 dancers into the Sydney Opera House. No, we definitely aggressively pitched them.
And you seem extremely open to change. We were talking about this someone yesterday, both in the sort of the technology of what you do. I mean, it's changed a lot from when you started in radio.
Yeah.
But then also to some extent in the form, and working in television, doing still your radio show, and now like moving into podcasts and other things. What is the thing that sort of keeps you open to all these sort of different forms?
I don't know. I'm not bored. I don't know. I like new stuff. I don't like being bored. Like mainly I just want to be interested. Mm-hmm. Like I want to like do something that's interesting. And like This American Life's been on the air for 20 years and is still weirdly hard to put on the air. Like it's still like I still have like 70-hour weeks just getting out the radio show, because I feel like we keep trying to invent things to do on the radio show that are hard for us as radio producers, and it's just hard to make anything good. Like even for the shows, like we did a show last week that was like no great shakes, but it was about animals, and we did 4 stories, and then I actually reported 2 other stories in addition to the 4 that were on the air, and it was like a 70-hour week just turning out like a normal radio show, just because it takes a long time to make anything good. And then when these other things come along, it just seems like, okay, well that would be fun and new, and it just seems like, I don't know, why live? if you're not out for your own amusement.
But have changes in technology, like in just the way that you can put a show together, has that made the process easier, or is it somehow added to you're
It's
able
both.
you're
It's
able to
both.
do more, so there's more
Yeah,
that you
you're
have
able to do more. You're able to. Yeah, exactly. Like now. Yeah, I mean, honestly, the technology of making radio is so simple that it's been pretty much the same since we started the show. But the technology that distributes it has changed. And really, like, we were not ahead of anything. Like, we were, if anything, like a little late to podcasting, even though we've been podcasting for over a decade now. But it's like, and the podcast business of our show kind of grew without us trying to make it grow. It's just that the world moved over to podcasts, and then it grew and grew and grew. And the radio audience stayed where it was, but the podcast audience grew until finally in August they met. They're the same size now. And now the podcast keeps growing and is now larger, a little larger. But we didn't do anything. We weren't canny enough to do anything. Like you're saying, like, well, how do you take advantage of this? I was like, I don't know. We just put it out as a podcast. I feel like we're not. And then sometimes we'll just see some. The only aggressive thing that we've done to try to like move ahead of the technology is that we've realized, in particular because of one producer in our staff, we realized like, oh, audio would do way better in social media if you could share it better. There's still no way to be like, there's like a 15-second quote in this show that I love, and while you're listening to the show, you can kind of go like on your phone, go like click, click, and then that one little audio bit either gets transcribed as words and the sound goes out and you can just post it to Twitter or Facebook. So we're now investing money in like inventing that, a little bit of money. And because it feels like we could be doing so much better on social media. Like audio does not do so great on social media.
But that's what I mean. How do you sort of like have your eye kind of on the horizon of, you know, with what you said, as you said, like you feel like you came to podcasting late, but you still, I think, were
Oh, and I understand your question, and I feel like I'm so empathizing with you as the interviewer because I am not answering your question. I'm just, it's not that I'm trying to avoid it. I think what happens is, like I'm 57, like, and so generally, like other people have to tell me. Like, you know what I mean? Like the reason why we're doing, like I'm not on, like I'm not on Facebook, you know, and because I'm busy. Like it just seemed like when I had a brief period where I was trying to do it, I was like, I can't do this and my job. Like it's so, I instantly became obsessed and I was like, no. And so I need other people to tell me. So like there was a producer on our staff who's younger, who's just like, this is a problem for us as audio people. And so we have to fix this. And it's the same way with the other things that we've done. It's just like other people point out like, oh, we got to do this. I was like, oh yeah, that's very true. We've got to do it. And like I feel like yeah, I'm usually have to be informed by others. But then I feel like, oh, well, the answers are usually pretty obvious on what to do when somebody points it out. And yeah. And
now when we were talking, I mentioned how when you were on the Mark Maron podcast, and this was like 6 years ago, you just very briefly mentioned how at the time you were trying to figure out a way to tell a story in chapters, and it sounded very much like it was the germ of the idea for what became Serial. And it was interesting to me to think that something that now seems as large as it does started from an idea that seemed so simple, like telling a series of stories in chapters. And do you find that that's what frequently happens, is that things kind of start from a relatively simple idea? It wasn't like you were thinking, well, let's make the biggest podcast ever.
We definitely weren't thinking make the biggest podcast ever. In fact, we didn't anticipate that it would necessarily work. And it really was, it was Julie Snyder on our staff. Again, it was other people who, Julie Snyder, the senior producer of This American Life at the time, and now the senior producer of Serial, who invented Serial with Sarah Koenig, who hosts Serial. Like she had this idea of like, she was just like, what's the biggest thing in the culture? The biggest thing in the culture are these TV shows that we all binge watch. And so where you just get hooked at the beginning and you just get involved in the characters and you can't not turn it off. You have to get to the next episode. And she was just like, can you do that with reporting? Can you do an investigative story that is so compelling at the beginning that people would stick around for a whole thing? And then she and Sarah decided to do that. We had a whole other idea, actually, that we were considering as our first spinoff. And then we went on a staff retreat, which makes it sound like we're a much better run show than we are, that we'd have a retreat. but we did have one. And Sarah and Julie are like, we kind of don't want to do this other idea, but we want to run at the long form story. And then our business plan really was like if we could get 300,000 people to download each episode, it could make enough money from advertising, from the little underwriter announcements on it, that we could pay for it. And then at this point, each episode of Serial has had 10.7 million people download. Like, it's bigger than most TV. It's crazy, even to us. And but we didn't anticipate it. And in fact, we were lucky in a sense because the technology changed the month that Serial came out. And that is, up until that point, podcasting was still something that podcasting wasn't quite a thing yet. And then that same month, this is the fall of 2014, Apple came out with on the iPhone, on the regular iOS, it came installed with a podcast app. And until then, it was just like, how do I get a podcast? What do I do? And then suddenly everybody who had an iPhone, which is hundreds of millions of people, right? It comes with this app and you just push it once and it's like it lists all of the top podcasts. And you're like, I don't know, try this one. And Julie talks about how when she was developing Serial in the months before that, she went to a family wedding and people would ask her, what are you working on? And she would say what she was working on. And they're like, well, how do we hear it on the radio? And she's like, well, it's not on the radio. And all of her Altacaca relatives were like, well, how do I hear it? And she was taking their phones and trying to put Stitcher on there, but it wasn't downloading. And she's like, oh, forget it, you don't need to hear it. And then I remember in the first piece of press we did for Serial, because we couldn't get any press for it before, we kept trying to say we're putting out a podcast, nobody was interested, and or a little bit of interest, but not much. And Mother Jones did a story about it. It was the first piece of press on it, and it was online. I remember the first set of comments was a woman who's just that's great, how do I watch it? And then there's all these comments of you don't watch it, you download it. And she's like, but how do I get it? And then we're like, oh no, nobody knows how to do this. And then we shot a video. I have an 87-year-old neighbor who listens to podcasts. She has an iPad, she listens to podcasts. She's a New Yorker, Mary Ahern, and she and I would see each other every night in the dog park. And we were talking about this stuff. I was like, can we shoot a video with you where you explain to these old people how to fucking get a podcast? So that's how worried we were if the world wasn't ready for podcasts. And then Apple did that. And then in the months after October and November of 2014, for the big podcasts, all podcast numbers went up. A huge boom. This American Life, we got 300,000 more people over the next 6 months than we had been getting each week. And I know for Radiolab that was true, for some other popular podcasts, everybody got this bounce, partly off of the technology changing, which again, we were just lucky, and then Serial just became its own thing in this way that nobody thought could happen.
I know, why do you think Serial has caught on the way that it has? What is it something specific about that show? Is it really just the sort of the good timing of the sort of the podcast moment? Why do you think it's caught on the way it has?
I mean, I think the thing that it caught on to, the thing that was interesting to us about the story was interesting to everyone. I think first and foremost, and then second, Sarah Koenig is a genius. Sarah Koenig, to do those interviews, the tone of her reporting in the interviewing and the writing and the authority she has as a reporter and the level of reporting she's doing, to have somebody who's such a hardcore investigative reporter in the most classic old school sense, and then is such an amazing actual performer on the microphone who can perform her own words and write for broadcast as well, is there are a handful of people who do that. And then the speed at which she's writing it, the audience doesn't know, but I know, she's writing an episode a week. Now they're doing one every 2 weeks, but with season one, she would write the episodes in a week. If anybody's tried to write an hour-long movie or radio show or anything in a week, it's amazing. Almost no one could do it. And especially with such a complicated story with so many people, with so many competing stories, they're trying to balance. What she's making is super delicate, and she's making it in real time. So she's a lot of the reason. And then Julie's an amazing editor. Julie's the best editor I've ever worked with, better than me.
And then Is it really as simple as an extra button on the iPhone as to like why we're sort of in this podcasting
No, it's
moment?
both. It's both the technology and the content. You have to have both, right? Like obviously you have to have both. And I think a lot of people came to podcasts through Serial. I mean, I've met so many people who were just like, yeah, I kind of heard a podcast, but then the only way you could get Serial was as a podcast, and so they were forced into the podcast world, and then suddenly they started like, well, what else do I like? And then that put them there. Like without the content, the technology by itself isn't enough.
And then how do you see the relationship between the show that you've always been doing, This American Life, and having it live in another form as a podcast, doing separate things for the podcast? Like, what for you is kind of the relationship between what you've always been doing and this kind of new form?
I mean, honestly, like it's not more sophisticated than it's just like a playground. like we don't change the show very much for the podcast. Like the way that it's nice to have a podcast or the radio show is that more people hear it. It's on all over the world. In a way that we weren't. I mean, we're on in Canada and Australia and I think Germany, but now like we really, like I gave speeches in Australia 3 years ago, and I would ask the audience, like, why are you here at this speech? Like, who are you? Like, are you hearing us on the Australian Broadcasting Corporation? And 3/4 of the audience was just getting the podcast. And so it gives us reach in this way that the internet allows. And then we can put stuff in the podcast that just like often we'll have moments and stories that we couldn't fit into the 59-minute radio show. And so often the podcast is 63 minutes, 70, sometimes we put in an entire extra act. This week's podcast has a song that we didn't put in the radio show just because we couldn't fit it in for time. And we almost added an extra act to it, actually. We had a whole other story, but anyway. And like, and also you can curse, which is it's so wonderful to be able to curse. I love cursing, and some stories really benefit from it. Like we did the story on these car dealers in Long Island, and like the radio version's wonderful, but like to hear them really curse, it just touches your heart, you know?
And now what are the economics of the podcasting model? Like, is it?
It's crazy. It's amazing. It's unbelievable. It's like boom time. It's a bubble. It's a bubble, but we're gonna ride out this bubble for as long as it lasts. Like the podcast ads bring in more money than the radio ads do. And even just for the little 15-second, this show brought to you by Squarespace or MailChimp, you know, like they bring in more money. The CPMs are like 50 or 60 CPMs for people who know what that is. So I'm experiencing this thing that I think very few journalists in America are experiencing, where newspapers, you work at a newspaper, they're having trouble and they're constantly buying each other and then yelling about problems and then buying each other again. And it's so hard, print journalism. And network TV news is having trouble. Weirdly, the only part of TV news that does great still is local TV news, which is why? It's so bad. Universally, any city you're in, it's horrible. And my theory, though I have no data on this, is that just old people still cannot look on the internet for the weather and they have to turn on the TV. That's the only way I can explain it. But anyway, I have no facts to back that up. That's just based on my prejudices. And so basically, really serious journalism, people are having such trouble surviving. And then weirdly, it's we happen to be holding the winning ticket. And then suddenly, because of podcasting, we have all this money and can do investigative reporting and can do things like stage a musical with Lin-Manuel Miranda and send 3 reporters for 5 months into a high school in Chicago that had 29 shootings in a year. To spend 3 reporters for 5 months into anything, you'd need and we're a little boutique radio show. We can do that now. And it used to be, we could do one investigative, when the show began, we could do one investigative-ish story a year because we were a staff of 4 people total. 4 people put out the show for the first few years. And then for a lot of years after that, it was just 5 people. And now, now we pretty much always have 1 or 2 people who are just doing big investigative things. And we're getting something on the air probably every month that's a serious piece of hardcore, took 6 months, 4 months, 3 months to put together a real piece of serious journalism. So it's been this incredible, it's crazy. I don't take it for granted. We were broke for so long.
And do you think that bubble's gonna first?
Yes.
And when is
Yeah,
that?
because I don't know. I hope not for very soon. But yeah, of course, right? Like, yeah, like audio. You know what I mean? Like, really, that's going to be number one? Like when virtual reality, like headsets come in, you know, like really, like we're going to be all listening to audio? Like, I don't know. Like somebody gave me a demonstration of some of the virtual reality journalism that people are doing, where they'll like take you to a refugee camp or they'll take you to a shooting, and it's arresting. It's really interesting.
And now, is it difficult for you in switching between sort of the more creative hat or the kind of your journalism hat of actually like doing the work of the show, and then your sort of businessman boss hat of worrying about the larger business of the program, of figuring these things out? Like,
To me, it's the same thing. To me, they're both like places to enjoy. Like I like running the business of the show. Like I like it. I think that's one of the reasons why we've done okay. Is like and also like as anybody who's ever written anything or edited anything or made a movie or tried to write an album knows, like doing any kind of creative work is so like frustrating and dispiriting, and you just feel like this thing is, I'm making everything you make is trying to be mediocre, and it's only through an act of will that you prop up like every part of it so it then gets to be good. And it's so uncertain if the thing will be good, whereas business is so simple. At least a business like I'm running, you know what I mean? Like a public radio show is at least a simple enough business that I can run it. And maybe it's just because our business is so simple, but like it's very like, it's like cooking or something. If you just like pay some decent attention to it. And I also feel like I was always very aggressive about the marketing of the show and the funding of the show. Because I felt like when we went on the air, we were such an uncertain prospect as a show. Like it took us a long time to get to the place where we were financially stable and we had an audience. Like it took us, I mean, these numbers sound big, but it's broadcasting numbers, so they should be big. But like it took us 4 years to get to 1 million people hearing every episode of the show. And it took Serial 4 weeks to get there, right? Like times are so different now. People can find stuff on the internet so much differently. Because to get people to find us, we had to market ourselves to every public radio station director. Like public radio there isn't like a network boss who says you're all going to run the show. You have to talk every program director at every station into putting you on the air, and you have to talk them into putting you on the air at a time that people will hear you. And so that's like a crazy, like, business problem. And honestly, the answer that we came to it, I was like, I really want this to be on the air, and I feel like in a way, like the more, and at the beginning our show was such like not a sure bet. Like people, when we were first on the air, to sound like I sound as a host of a public radio show, like program directors would be like, well, we like Ira. He's like a good reporter on All Things Considered, but like, are you gonna get a real host? Like, where's the guy who's gonna be like the public radio host of this show? And then program directors would be like, I remember like one thing was like, well, some weeks it's funny, and it's like this David Sedaris guy, and then some weeks it's really serious, and so how will the audience know what they're getting? And we would say like, well, it's always us. Like, it's always us. Like, we're the lens, it's always gonna be us. And like, we were not a sure bet at all. And I feel like the more like off-center your mission, the more weird your mission, the more different than other people you are, I think the more cunning you have to be about the business side. And I was like, I am gonna fucking kill the business side. And for us, the answer to the business problem was, I learned that the soft spot for the program directors is if you could make the money in the pledge drive, they would put you in the air. And in the first year or two of our show, it was our business plan that you couldn't get, we basically did pledge modules that were like 3 and 4 minutes long that you could run during morning edition and All Things Considered, because nobody listened to our show. Like, we were on at times that nobody would hear the radio, but like stuff you could run during drive time, and the gimmick of them was that they were funny. That was our special gimmick. They were like funny, and they didn't sound like everything they were doing. The pledge drive is so awful, and it's like, and it has everything going against it. It's repetitive, and you're asking people for money. People don't like either of those things. And then like, if you could just come on and say something no one had heard before. And so we would do these things where I would stop people outside of Starbucks and ask them how much they were paying for their coffee and how much did they spend on coffee that week. And do you listen to your public radio station? Oh yeah, I listen all day long. It's like, how much have you given us? And then you just like watch sweat, like literally like pour down their faces. Or we had a statistic that like 1 in 10 public radio listeners actually gives us money. And we're like, well, instead of coming to you, we'll just go to our vendors and get the same deal. So we would go to the phone company, we'd be like, all right, our radio station has 70 phones, we only want to pay for 7 of them. And then you just hear the operator of the phone company just go like, wait, you want to do what? And then like that was another one. It killed on the radio, let me tell you. For public radio, that was really funny. And basically, our first pitch to stations was like, don't pick up our show because we're trying to remake radio. Don't pick up the show because we're like idealistic young people trying to like change the medium that we're in. Like, pick us up because we will make you money. We will make you money. And then we had testimonials from public radio program directors. I remember the guy from WGBH was like, we ran these spots during Morning Edition in Boston, and we would run one spot, and we would bring in $35,000. And then, like, we were in. Like, that's how we got on the air. And I feel like, you know, if you're doing music, if you're doing film, like, you have to be so cunning. You have to really think about, like, who am I selling to and what am I going to say that will make them get into business with me? Because I didn't care if the stations wanted us on for the right reasons. I just wanted to be on because I felt like we will prove ourselves. Like I feel like I believe in this show, and let's just get it out there. And I feel like the most common thing that happens is somebody does something that's really special and nobody ever knows that it exists. And if you don't want that to happen, you have to will that into being, and you have to be smart about it. It's been interesting working with Birbiglia, because Birbiglia, Mike Birbiglia, who I did Don't Think Twice now, is the most shameless person I've ever known about like asking for advice from more experienced people. And so on our 2 movies, like he had like Michael Weber, who did The Spectacular Now, give him notes. He had Phil Lord read a script, who did like the Lego movie. You know, like he would just show it to anybody. There was a day that I came to a reading in Birbiglia's like dumpy apartment in Brooklyn. And like, so we'd do these readings of the script, and we'd be sitting around a table, and, not around a table, we'd be sitting around his dumpy living room, and like actor friends would be there, and everybody would read different parts, and then we would all like talk about like what was working, what wasn't working in the film. We did so many of these readings. Because Birbiglia's process is he develops material like an improv comedian. You just do it over and over and over again, make it get better and better and better. And so at one of these readings, there's this character actor sitting on the table, an older actor, and I was like, and during the reading, I'm like, God, that guy is so good. Like, who is that actor? I've never seen him in anything. And like, he was playing like 3 or 4, he was playing all the older men parts, 3 or 4 parts, and he was just killing it. And every part was like slightly different. He was really funny, but it was like very heartfelt. And afterwards, Mike was like, Ira, have you met Frank Oz? I was like, wait, Yoda is at our reading at your apartment? Like, I was just like, and he's like so shameless, and then he takes their advice, and I feel like, you know what I mean? Like, people gave him really good notes. And
now to start talking about Don't Think Twice, one way to maybe transition into it is considering like all the cultural momentum that's in television right now, all the money that's in podcasting, why even make a movie right now?
I know, right? I was saying this to Mike, why make a movie? It takes a year, it's such a horrible process. The chances of anybody seeing it, the chances of it even being good, like, and then if anybody's seeing it, are like, it's crazy, it's so wrong-headed.
And what was his response?
He wants to make movies. He's into movies. I don't know, and then like, and I was just like, great, do this one by yourself. And then he just kept showing me scripts, and I was like, oh wait, you know, you should change this part here and move this part to there, and he totally played me.
But now, was the process of making this new film different in any way than the previous film you made together, Sleepwalk with Me, simply because that project came from a stage piece that he'd done? I think there was also a radio piece. Like, it makes sense the way that would be sort of adapted, especially sort of with you, into a movie. This one is just him sitting down, writing a screenplay. Like, what was your role in that process?
I mean, my role was really just I would come to the readings and I would notice what wasn't working about the script. And honestly, there was a long time, I mean, Birbiglia would tell you this too, where I didn't think it was a movie. Like it just didn't make any, it was just like, why are you making this? I don't understand it. Because he had these improv comedians. It's a film about improv comedy. And basically it's a group of 6 best friends. And they've been doing improv comedy for 11 years together. And they're kind of like, their careers aren't going anywhere. They're like one of these groups that everybody loves. Everybody's like, oh, you guys should be famous, but they never get famous. And then 2 of them get to audition for, we don't call it Saturday Night Live because that would be a violation of a copyright, but our version of Saturday Night Live. And 2 of them get to audition for, you know, the biggest sketch comedy show on TV. And then it throws all of them into kind of like emotional, it breaks up their friendships, and everybody else has to decide like, do I want to quit? Like, do I want to quit? Should I quit? Like, I'm in my 30s, I'm not becoming successful, maybe it's time to get a normal job like a normal person. And in the early scripts, it just wasn't there. And like the audition for the Saturday Night Live, that was there. But then the characters didn't conflict. Like he didn't push it to the crisis point, so you couldn't really tell what it was about. You couldn't tell that it's about failure, about coping with failure. And he just hadn't figured out what the movie was. Yeah, like I just remember like I had to say to him like, look, I'm supportive of you as your friend, but like I just don't think it's a movie. And then at some point he's like, no, you don't understand. It's The Big Chill about failure. And like I was like, oh, then write that movie. And then he kind of did. Like then, unfortunately for me. And a lot was different. To answer your question, I'm sorry, I didn't answer your question. Your question was like, what was different? Like I gave him notes on the script, and I sat in the editing room, and that was which was an incredibly intensive process because we realized things didn't work, and we changed the tone of the movie a little bit, and we killed a subplot, and we invented new scenes, and like we wrote new stuff in the editing room. Then did 2 days of reshoots, and basically so I functioned as an editor. And most of my real job is I'm an editor. Like on the radio show, mostly I'm an editor. Like I report my own stories too, but most of my day is deciding what are we going to cover, and then literally just editing stories, hearing drafts of stories, and then giving notes. Like that's the biggest part of my job. And so that's what I did for him. And then the biggest thing that was different was we knew what we were doing way more, having made one film.
And then is for you that the process of kind of helping him with editing the movie, is that very different from editing a radio program, or like are they more similar than they might seem?
They are more similar than they might seem, because you need to establish certain things about certain people for emotional points to hit later. Like this, you know what I mean? Like emotional things weren't happening late in the film because we weren't establishing things correctly at the beginning of the film, and it's so similar to a radio story, where like sometimes you're marching people through the plot and you accidentally remember, oh, wait a second, you accidentally didn't remember to like, I haven't established who this person is well enough, so this has feeling down the road here. And it's surprisingly similar. And then with a fiction movie, it's such a miracle. You can just make up the facts. It's crazy. Like, it's so amazing. Can I say, like, that's the part about it that's like for any journalist to be able to say like, oh my God, because when you're a reporter, you're just like, I really wish I had a quote where they would just establish like, this is the way they feel about it. But you go in the interview and you ask them 5 times, and they just don't feel that way, you know, or they feel that way, but they can't say it, which is the bane of my existence. And like, and you're just like, we need this character point, we can't get it. Whereas in a movie, you can literally think of like, in the dream version of this, where would this happen? You'd be like, well, they'd be in a basement, and they'd be going through old photos of when they used to be young, and they were starting the group. And then like, your art director can make the old photos, and you put them in a basement, and you know, like it all, like your dream version of just like, where is the best place in the world for them to have this conversation? Or where is like, if they're gonna break up, like, where's the best place for them to break up? You know, if they're gonna like fall in love, like, where's the very best place? And you can just like, it's crazy. That's the one thing about fiction that's incredible. You can see why it's so popular. And why it's a nice vacation from my day job. Right. Like, that's the one part. It's like, oh, we can just make up shit. It's fucking crazy.
And now, do you find that the storytelling is essentially the same in fiction and nonfiction, or do they function in some different way.
I might be working at not a sophisticated enough level, but for me, they function the same. Like for me, you need to get something in motion to pull people in. You need people to relate to. You need at least one person to relate to, or there's no feeling in the whole thing. You need to give people stakes. And really, like, you just have to get a plot going that's surprising. It has to be driving at some thought about the world that's surprising. You have to be documenting, either in fiction or nonfiction, something that people aren't documenting before, or else you're hacked. And really, like, just the structure of it is so similar. Like, we're building our show around plot. The radio show is built around plot for like a bunch of reasons, but one of them is that, like, it just pulls you in more. Like any story we do with plot. And so I'm already working in that world, and plot is just literally just like, this thing happened, and that led to this next thing, and that led to this next thing. That's the thing about stories, is that they're stupid, actually. Like, because like really, it really is just like, this led to this, led to this, and then you can attach like ideas and feelings at different points. But the structure is so simple, and that's actually what makes it like, it makes it possible to produce stuff, I think, because once you understand, oh, all it is like, this is going to lead to this, is going to lead to this, is going to lead to this, and any feeling you want to have happen has to happen in the structure of action, and then you either find action or you know, you create it.
And now, for you, yesterday when I was talking with you and Mike, the two of you had a brief disagreement over the nature of being a boss. That Mike feels that he prefers to have no boss, and you seem resigned to the fact that you will always have some kind of boss.
Well, no, now I don't have a boss, really. I don't have a boss now. Wait, say what you're saying.
Because I'm asking you about sort of the nature of being a boss, and the idea, like, for you, like, he seems to really like the idea of not having a boss. You seemed a little more ambivalent about it, so I'm wondering how you feel about the idea of both, like, whether you have a boss now, and then that in turn just makes you the boss.
I was fine with having a boss, because I had a boss when I was at NPR. I had editors, and up until recently, This American Life was part of WBEZ Chicago, and then we spun out as a separate business. They and we both wanted it, and it's been very happy. Like, just because we got to be kind of a complicated little business, and it was better for us to be separate. But they still get money, and their name is on the show, and everybody's happy. But like, up until we did in July, I had a boss. The boss was the general manager of the radio station, and like most people, like if you have to learn to manage your boss, like you manage up, right? Like you manage your boss. And like when I was a reporter for NPR, like I was very like careful to give my editors what they asked me for, but then I was always aware of like, yes, I'm giving you everything you want, but I'm also out for my own fun, and I will just put anything else in the story that I think will make it good and enjoyable for me. But like I was always, like, I'm a good employee. I'm a good minder. Like I'm a very obedient minder of authority, and then so I don't have a problem with having a boss. I feel like actually it's part of being cunning about getting your work out. Like if you're a baby reporter at a radio network which doesn't do the work that I do usually, like you have to be cunning about like who your bosses are, and that's part of your job. Like that's just having savvy and getting your work into the world, and that's nothing to be ashamed of. In fact, like you gotta hustle. And so no, like this, if you know, unless you're working in a place where the people are dreadful, like having a boss shouldn't be an issue for any creative person who wants to get their work out. They should be cunning enough to work around the boss, or they should work somewhere else and find another place to work. And yeah, I'm go back to your question. I'm so sorry.
Well, no, that was but now for you in turn, as you have sort of become the boss of others, has your staff has grown.
I'm a monster. No.
Well,
No.
Is that a difficult sort of position for you to learn? And also, do you ever get the sense when
it was
the reporters
to learn.
working with you,
Yeah.
when they're trying to get around you, when they're trying to use their cunning to get their ideas past you?
I appreciate it. I note it. I totally note it. I totally note when I'm being like sweet talked into some bullshit. And I appreciate it. That's a person doing their job, making me want what they want. That's fine. That's great. Good for them, good for me. Like that's life. But more like This American Life, it's run as so much more of a collaboration. And for years, like I ran it side by side with Julie Snyder, and it was a partnership. And a lot of it she ran, truthfully. And now I run it with this guy, Brian Reed, who's so super talented, and Joel Lovell, another amazing editor, and it's a very collaborative, we're like a really small, it's funny because I have friends who work at newspapers and bigger organizations. I realize like, oh, we're like a little boutique, and it's very horizontal, and we argue through and figure out a lot of it together, both what are we going to cover, and then in the edits, literally, like it'll be 5 and 6 of us. The process of making a radio story is like somebody does a draft and then they play it for 1 or 2 people, and then on each subsequent draft you bring in 1 more person from the staff, so in each draft you have somebody who's never heard it, who can just be like, this whole section doesn't make sense, or I'm bored here, or like, you guys are crazy about this. And so by the end, on a lot of stories, a lot of the staff has been there, and it's very like back and forth. Like I don't know. I definitely have had moments where the entire staff has been, where I've thought we should do one thing, or I thought a story should do one thing, and everybody's been against me, and I've been like, oh, like, I must be wrong. You know what I mean? And like, I definitely have said, oh, well, someday when I get my own radio show, I'm gonna do it this way. But since it's our radio show, you know what I mean? And it's, I don't know. It took me a long time to learn how to be a boss, though. Like, cause I was used to like, when you're a reporter, you're just not, you're in a collaborative situation with your editor, but it's not the same. Like, you really are used to doing everything yourself and just being like, and it took me a while just to learn how to work with other people, and really I feel like the people who I was working with explained to me how to be different. I mean, this is years ago now, but like, I really did change. Like, I would just be like, I just had this feeling of like, well, this is the obvious way to mix this. Why didn't you mix it this way? And I was like, that's not the way to act. Do you know what I mean? But it was so obvious to me. It was so obvious to me. Like, of course you bring in the music there. Like, how could you, like, of course, on the rising action, of course. But like, of course, like, that's because I'm a crazy person that I think that. And like, I really had to learn to collaborate. Like that, it was a huge transition in my life. Like, honestly, it was like a very hard fought thing that I'm grateful that the people I work with were patient with me. Like, I feel like I came around to them, and years ago, but still, it's like, yeah.
I know over the last few years, as you've started doing these live shows, like both doing a live version of the radio show, and then also these sort of separate events, what has it been like for you, sort of stepping out from behind the microphone, getting away from the radio booth, and actually sort of being like a stage performer, essentially? Has that felt like an entirely different mode for you, or is it?
It does feel entirely different. Yeah, like I'm touring with this dance show.
And why even do that? Why get involved in that?
I know. I don't know, it seemed like it was gonna be fun. I don't know, like I saw these dancers and it seemed like, oh, the aesthetic of what you do is exactly the aesthetic of what I do, but you don't use words. And like mine is all words, and couldn't you just smush these two things together into a thing? And then it just seemed like, what an interesting, weird idea. And then they really liked them, and we had fun working on it, and we're just like, all right, let's go on tour. And so we've been on tour on weekends for 2 years, but it is weird. Like, I do find myself on stage, like sometimes it'll be like, you know, I'm working 70 or 80 hours making the radio show, and then the next morning up at like 5 in the morning to get on a plane to like go and then rehearse the show in the space so they can tech in the show, and then do the show, and then do the reception for the public radio station. And like, I do, like during those afternoons, I do just feel like, what am I doing? It's weird. And being a performer, like I had never been like a pure performer before that. Like, we go around and give speeches, but I had never been in a thing where like we have a scripted show that we're gonna perform city after city. And I didn't even understand that, like, oh, that's an entire like craft to itself, is acting like you've never said something before, and saying it like you're saying it spontaneously. Like this thing I'm saying right now, I've said it before.
And now, do you feel like, especially in doing these live shows, have they changed your dynamic with your audience? Like, do you feel like kind of being out in the world more, are you meeting your listeners and finding out like who those people actually are? And has it changed your dynamic of your conception of like who you're making the show for?
No, because no. I would be, if I were a good person, that would be true. No, like I really, like I and the people I work with, we are very pure about this. We make the show for ourselves. We're out for ourselves. We're making what we think we would like to hear on the radio, and what would amuse us. And I feel like nobody ever talks about like the golden rule when it comes to media, but it's just like I feel like it's super important. Golden rule: don't make anything that you yourself wouldn't consume. You know, just like that's the basics. That's just like that's God's law. You know what I mean? And I feel like if you're not doing that, take a look in the mirror at what you're doing with your life. Like we just like all we're doing is we make something that we ourselves would want to consume, and we just feel like, oh, our taste is normal. We like all the stuff that everybody likes, so it'll be fine.
And now we're gonna have a few minutes for questions from the audience. There's a microphone right up here in the front, so anyone with any questions, feel free to come up to the microphone. But while we're waiting for anyone, I'm gonna, the idea of you as an interviewer, like is it a big switch for you going from being, you know, the idea of the interview and going from being the one asking the questions, the one having to answer questions, is that a big shift?
Well, now I'm used to being interviewed because I have to be interviewed so much, like things like this, but also to promote stuff. And I so try to be a good interviewee because I just feel like I so relate more to being you in this situation than to being me. And when I'm answering questions as the interviewee, I'm totally listening to myself as the interviewer, being like, come on, get to the point, like blah, 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 come on, just answer the question. And I totally like, I'm so awake to it, but like intermittently, because then also I'm just trying to like be like, what can I think of to even answer the question? So I'm going in and out of being the interviewer. It's weird. So it's much more comfortable for me to be the interviewer.
Mm-hmm. And so we've got some questions there. Go ahead.
Hello?
Oh,
there we go.
There you go.
I was curious, how did you find your voice editorially and also your actual speaking voice for the radio?
How did I find my voice editorial? And are you somebody who does media?
Yes, I work at National Geographic and I do digital video, so I'm just curious.
And are you on air?
Sorry?
Are you on air?
No.
I mean, like it took me a really long time. It took me longer than I think most people. Like I was kind of a stiff at first. And in fact, there's like a video on YouTube where I play a story that I've been doing, like not in the first year, the second year, the third year, the fourth year, like it was in my 7th year. And what I sounded like was like a bad imitation of an NPR reporter, like very, very stiff and very like talking in a very formal way, like somebody who was imitating a newscaster, which I was. And it took me a really long time, like as a performer, to get to a point where I could sound like myself. And I made it a project. And the thing I did is that since I started at NPR in Washington, I realized like I wanted to sound just like I sound when I really talk. And I was like, I should just try live radio. And so I got a late night show on the local public radio station that was an hour a week with 2 friends. And it was a free-form radio show. And I just got practice at, and I would prepare things like the stories we do for This American Life, where there would be like script and quotes and script and quotes, but I would try to perform it as if there was no script, as if I was just talking live. And then we would talk to each other, and I would do just like whole stories with tape, where I would be like talking through the stories and playing the tape as a way to just like turn my performance into something else. And I did that for 5 years before I did This American Life. I willed a change in my performance, and then finally got to this, which is, I don't know what it is, but it's the best I can do. And then as a writer, it took me like forever. It took me 6 or 7 years of trying to be a reporter. Like I was lucky. Like I started at NPR. I tucked my way in as an intern in 1978. I was 19. I was 19. I was a freshman in college, and I was okay at mixing audio for my college radio station, and just the basics of mixing. And the one skill I had was I was a really good editor. Like just from the moment like somebody gave me like a 10-minute interview to cut down to 3 minutes, I instantly was able to evaluate, this is the good part, this is the bad part, this should come before this, and this should take this out, take this sentence out. Like for whatever reason, like that was just built in. Every other part of being a writer, a reporter, it just took me forever. And I really spent my 20s like the people in our movie, like the people who Don't Think Twice, like I really just didn't even know, like I was way worse than them. I really wasn't ever sure if I was ever gonna make it. Like if I was ever gonna learn to write a story that was good. And for that whole period, I was like, I knew what good was. I knew I was not there. Yeah, I was bad for a really long time. And for all my 20s, I kept thinking, well, should I just pay for journalism school? Or should I just keep trying to make stuff? And I always thought, like, well, maybe if I spent a year in journalism school, it would shortcut this process, which is taking me so long. And ultimately, like, I just couldn't get together the money to do journalism school. And so I kept kind of like just working. And my theory was if I just keep making stuff over and over and over, eventually I would learn. And I was lucky because I had good editors. Like, I think anybody who's in a position where like they know they're not as good as they should be, like the thing that I decided was rather than pay for journalism school, I would just pay reporters who I thought were amazing. I would pay them $50 to just read this and tell me what I'm doing wrong, and give them a script. And like, you know, and that turned out to be so much cheaper than school. It was amazing. And you know, and they would take half an hour and sit with me. And I feel like that and watching Birbiglia, I'm reminded of that, like how he'll just get help from anybody. And I would say to anybody starting out, just go to the people whose work you like and pay them money and just say like, look, Richard Linkletter, you know, and just say like, what am I doing wrong? And I think like you'll find somebody who will help you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Jordan Brown. I'm a lecturer at Texas State University, and we every semester use This American Life and you as an example of like the hard ask for like providing great content for a really long time, and then asking to fund the program. And I was wondering if you could talk about your thought process behind that, and if you were jealous of how easy it was for Serial to do it as well.
Wait, you're saying as an example, what are you asking for an example of? The hard ask?
Yeah, so like you give all this great content up front, and then once a year you say like, hey, we need your money.
Yes, and you're saying, what's your question?
So the process behind like that you go through, like how important that is to you to do the content up front, stuff like that.
I feel like it's a really great model for all media. Like that basically you provide something that people really like, and then like, yeah, I think if it's good, if the material is good enough and interesting enough, I feel like when you ask, people will pay because people are normal. You know, like not everybody will pay, but like enough will pay that you'll be fine. I think I love that that's a model.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hello. So you did a talk here at the Paramount, I want to say a couple of years ago, and during the Q&A, someone mentioned they were from your alma mater, and you said you were so touched. You were like, hold on a second, I really want to give you something. So you ran backstage, grabbed your backpack, and pulled some balloons out of your backpack and made them a balloon animal.
Yeah.
And that was one of the most spontaneous, just funny things I've ever witnessed in a live show. So I'm wondering, do you always travel with balloon animals in your backpack?
I do. Can we get my backpack? Can somebody from backstage bring my backpack? If somebody, okay, I'll get, yeah, like it turns out, I did magic tricks at kids' parties when I was in middle school, and so and so I still can do 2 or 3 magic tricks. And I could still make like a Snoopy or a swan or like, you don't get much call for this on the radio. Yeah, so I always do. And then you can find yourself in random situations where it's handy. It's handy. I like, you know what I mean? Like, I have to say, the least effective way to pick up women ever. But like, you know, if you're traveling, like stuff can happen. My favorite time I got to do this was I was asked to do you guys know, do you know what Rookie is? There's this website for teenage girls called Rookie that Tavi Gevinson started that my wife helped Tavi run for years and years. And and they do a feature called Ask a Grown Man, and I think somebody dropped out, like usually it's like Seth Rogen and people like that, and it's like super famous people, and they're like, somebody dropped out, could you do Ask a Grown Man? And basically teenage girls send in their questions about the boys in their life and the fucked up things boys say to them, and then they ask grown men, like they say, you know, like, please explain this guy's behavior, and then you see like John Hamm and Seth Rogen and all these guys answer it, and they're like, could you do Ask a Grown Man, but you know, you're not so famous with this crowd, so could you do balloon animals while you're doing it? Here we go, poodle. I wonder if like people sometimes like every now and then, like people don't recognize you that much if you're in the radio, but sometimes people will stop me and ask me for a selfie, and I wonder if like if that could be the move, if people stop asking for selfies and start asking for like little balloon poodles. Yes.
You spoke earlier about investigative journalism, and I wanted to ask you about the episode that with Foxconn. What did you learn from that, and what do you think that impacts it made for other podcasts or other shows?
Okay, so briefly, this was an episode where we had a professional storyteller, Mike Daisy, super talented guy, come on and tell a story that he said was entirely true, and we fact-checked it. We went to a dozen sources in China, and we fact-checked everything we could fact-check. The one thing that we did not do, and truthfully we shouldn't have aired the program without this, was that we didn't check with his translator. He should have said, like, well, here's the number I have, but she's just some translator I met at the hotel, and we called the number, and like we just didn't reach the translator. It was like, everything else checked out. I was just like, okay, let's go with it. And then after we broadcasted, it turned out that, like, although the things he was documenting about Apple manufacturing were true, with one exception that we pointed out in his original show, the incidents didn't happen. Like the things, he didn't meet the people who he said he saw. Like the translator came forward after we broadcast and said, like, well, I was there with him. Like he didn't meet this person doesn't exist. And so we retracted the show. And like up until that point, like we had fact-checked the way that I had fact-checked at All Things Considered in Morning Edition, which is the editor and the reporter, basically would go through everything. And in this case, the producer of that story, like, we went out and we found people who understood human rights groups who knew exactly what was going on in those plants and fact-checked, like, the things that he said happened in the plants. What came out of it is like now we have professional fact checkers. Like it's like the New Yorker magazine where everything we do goes through professional fact checkers, and so there's a whole other layer in the process. So which basically before we were fact checking like daily journalists, which we weren't anymore. Like and it's entirely appropriate once we were doing deep features that we should be fact checking the way that the New York Times magazine and the New Yorker magazine. So now we have this amazing fact checker, Christopher Sotalo, on our staff, and other people who help us out, and everything is just rigorously done. And it's made the show better. So, yeah.
So there's this pretty famous quote that you have about taste and talent.
Yes.
And it's something like I watch every 6 months, I feel like, to remind myself of taste and talent meeting at the same place. But
what do you do?
I'm a filmmaker. I actually have Thank You, Del, which is the story about Del Close.
Oh, wow. Oh. You're the competing improv comedy movie against our movie.
Yeah, 9:30 tonight.
Oh. So at South by Southwest, there's two movies about improv comedy. One that's it's a make-em-up, that's ours, and one that's full of facts, and I hear is wonderful from Mike Birbiglia, who saw it. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it is. I like it. It's good. I like your movie too. It was amazing.
Thank you. Thank you. That's the last kind word we'll have. We're fierce competitors from the marketplace of America. There can be but one improv movie in this world.
It would be amazing to watch Mike Birbiglia and I fight. It would be very sad.
It would be very sad.
My question, it's been a few years since you've said that, and I want more of it. And I wondered if there was any addendums to that thought on, like taste and talent matching each other.
I mean, I don't know. Like that was something I said sort of spontaneously in an interview that became more famous than my actual work. Like weirdly, I mean, the main thing that I would say to somebody who's like looking to do creative work is like just do it now. You know, like I feel like I don't say that in that video, but like don't wait. I feel like it's so easy. It's so hard to make anything that it's so easy to put it off and just be like, well, when I get the right financing, when I find the right this or that, and I just feel like just start making it now. Like one of the great things about this moment in our culture is that it's never been easier to make something. The technology's never been cheaper, and honestly, like there's a way to get the thing out to people, and you know, you can get your stuff out on the internet and get an audience and do a small version so as to get you enough backing to do the big version. Like there's so many fucked up things in our country and in the world right now, and we live in a very dark time in a lot of ways, but the one place where things are going great is that if you want to do creative work, if you have something you want to make, like you can actually make some version of it and get it to people. Like, and just like, don't wait, is what I would say. Like, don't wait, just make the thing, make a version, and then make it better, and then make it better. So.
Thank you.
We should stop, right? We're at time.
Do you want to do one more question?
It's up to you. Yes, of course.
We'll do one last question.
Hi. So how do you feel about the rise of the Gimlet podcast network?
Of the what?
Gimlet Media.
How do I feel about the rise of the Gimlet Media?
Yeah, and do you have to compete with them for talent and listeners and sponsors?
I have slightly mixed feelings, but they're only slightly mixed. Like, I'm excited that people are making more good stuff. Gimlet Media was created by Alex Blumberg, one of the producers, longtime producers of This American Life. He's wonderful. They're making a lot of different shows, and they are building an army. I love the ambition of it, and I love that he's bringing people to podcasting and giving them shows and inventing things. I think all of that's great. You know, then there's like a small part of me which is just like very, very competitive all the time with everyone. And I just feel like, oh, why aren't we doing that? Why aren't we doing that? But I feel like I don't want to do that. Right. Like, I'm glad he's doing that. Like, I want to do this. Right. So.
Oh, great. Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah. Good. So please, everyone, join me in thanking our guest, Mr. Ira Glass.
Thank you. That was so good. Oh my God.